everybody. Welcome to Trek FTP, which does not stand for File Transfer Protocol. It stands for Fight the Patriarchy. Um, we're going to talk about Code of Honor, which is one of possibly the most racist hours of television I have ever seen, certainly. So if you are not prepared to talk very frankly about racism, misogyny, issues like that, this is not going to be the show for you. And you might want to skip this segment altogether. So I would like to introduce Robin Alyssa, and she's going to take us to Space Africa.
All right, so our journey to Space Africa today begins like any other normal day on the Enterprise. The crew is called in to deliver some vaccines to Ligonian 4, and lo and behold, we get to Ligonian 4, and the crew of the Enterprise meets the chief, the acting head of the planet. Let me pull up his name. Hagan. They are themed aboard the Enterprise. Everything at first goes well until they meet our main Enterprise crew member, star of the episode, in Tasha Yar, our wonderful security chief. Hagan takes a liking to her, and he takes her back to the planet and continues to lock her in a cage for the remainder of the episode until she is forced to fight for his love and honor. So that is this episode. It's a rough one.
It really is. And it's fascinating to me, right? Like, because this is the same franchise that brought us Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, which was an exploration of the toxicity of racism. And then we come here. So, William, you have thoughts. I know you have thoughts. Oh, we're bringing the tea.
The drinking of the tea begins.
You know, I have many questions. But to start off first, I want to know what in the world was Roddenberry thinking in this case. Now, I know we've heard a lot of things. Thank you, Jermaine. We've heard a lot of things as far as his past, as far as his different types of relationships. We'll call it like that.
Nicely put.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his militaristic history, you know, and all that stuff. That's fine. Okay, cool. But I'm trying to figure out in the 80s what led to this, you know. Now, the internet really wasn't much back then compared to what it is now. Facebook didn't exist. There was no social media. There was no cancel culture back then. Was literally throwing tomatoes at the stage. That's it. That's the way it was back then, which I believe it should stick to. But you know, that's neither here nor there. But other than that, it's like when I saw it, I first saw this. I saw this as a teenager, but I didn't realize what I was seeing until I was in college. Now, because I was in college, I went to the University of Arkansas, and like 2% of the world that are alive loves and lives and breathes Star Trek. So there was a very few people that I could confide in and have this conversation with, because not only because it was hard enough looking for someone to like Star Trek, right? But have the extensive knowledge to watch all of them, and then have the as Wolf would put it, the unmitigated gall to have a conversation about racism on a show that is supposed to combat that. So I was thrown by what I was seeing. It was one of those moments when I watched it that I was so blown away that I didn't even have a reaction. Like I'm low-key thinking I'm dreaming. Like, because I remember the show quite. I didn't even need to watch it again. It was I remember the show quite vividly. I remember a few videos ago. I told Maria, I've actually always wanted to have a conversation with someone about this, because can we and Ozzy was here too. Can we please address this? Like, why did they do that? Why did they make the white girl, for lack of a better phrase, because that's what she was, at the center to be the trophy? You know, at least Princess Jasmine had enough woman her to say, I'm not a prize to be won. You know, so what is going on here? What in your personal opinion, guys, girls, what do you think was going through Roddenberry's head in constructing this particular episode? What was he trying to represent, or did he just run out of aliens, and or did Klingons not work out in the original series? So we're gonna ignore that. We're just gonna ignore. I'm already ignoring what Klingons looked like in TOS. I'm ignoring all of that because I'm putting it under the umbrella. You didn't have a budget. I'm gonna ignore the fact that Klingons were low-key black people.
We're picking our childhood trauma here.
Yep.
Is what we're doing.
Yeah.
I see.
So,
I see.
Yeah. So it's like I'm just gonna let that go and come to TNG where I was raised, in Deep Space Nine where I was raised, and ask the question, guys, what was going through his head, and what was that supposed to represent? Because I understand it was the 80s, low budget, that's cool, but Wakanda is even more developed than that. And it existed in the comics back then.
It did, right? And Wakanda has a much longer history than this. And what interests me about this is, you know, it's actually written partially. There's a woman has a co-writing credit for this, and so I'm on Earth. Did you come up with this? To answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what people were thinking. I don't know how this got past the writer's room, like why this didn't end up like tossed in a bin somewhere, because it clearly should have, right? They set up the Ligonians as a primitive species or primitive species,
Red
primitive
flag,
society.
number one.
Pick your term, right? They set them up as being primitive, and so they make a number of assumptions about what primitive species would look like, and like we see like how they're dressed, right? When Picard meets Luton and Narina and Hagan, they're wearing not a whole lot, at least as far as TNG goes. The men are shirtless. Urena is like in this sort of like shoulder-bearing dress. Luton is wearing the equivalent of like gold lame, basically sort of identifying him as the high chieftain, what have you. Whereas we have our civilized Federation people standing back and being like, what are we looking at? I mean, and it's very much this kind of like warlord situation, right? Because I mean, Luton actually he doesn't beam aboard the Enterprise first, right? He actually has Hagan beam aboard and then like roll out a literal red carpet. And it's all in this, you know, this hyper violent, hyper masculine phraseology. They talk about the Ligonian code of honor in terms of counting coup, even, right? And how they have to have power, and they get that by possessing things, which is one of the reasons they choose Tasha Yar, because Tasha Yar is both a white woman and therefore identified as a prize, but it's also valuable to overpower her as well, because she is the security officer. So this is a big power move by Luton. And again, it's just like, what were you thinking when you did this? I mean, these people aren't a people. They are caricatures. I mean, even taking into account, you know, how little time we have to sort of talk about their culture and interact with their culture, this is a caricature. I mean, Hagan literally tries to elbow Tasha Yar aside because he's not going to interact with a woman. I think one of the most interesting parts, actually, of this particular episode is, you know, how the racist thematic underpinnings of, you know, Black toxic masculinity, sexualization of Black bodies, and, you know, primitivity and concepts of primitivity are all also bound up in a misogynist framework, because the women are literally objects in this show, right? Literally objects. The only power Urena has is in the relinquishing of it, right? Because she owns everything. She owns whatever, which is a direct link to her being an object, right? But she surrenders that to her spouse as soon as she's married. So all of her value, all of her usefulness just disappears into the ether upon marriage. Nuts. I mean, if I'm going to call this, if I'm going to use a technical term, it's nuts.
I think so. One of the things I have been kind of thinking about as we've been talking about this episode is, and it feels like it was pulled literally from like the 60 scripts of Doctor Who. Like this script for this episode feels like something I would watch if I'm watching like classic Doctor Who, because of the way they tackle race issues, you know, the way that the patriarchal dynamic, the things like that, you can kind of, I don't want to say you can kind of tell they're trying to dig deeper into that and have a bigger message about, you know, empowering women and things like that, because I think this episode fails clearly in that. But you can kind of tell that there is a clear intention to what they're doing, and it's just rooted in these very, very, very old-fashioned ideas that, compared to the rest of TNG or the rest of Enterprise or Deep Space, or even Enterprise or Deep Space Nine, things like that, that, you know, just haven't existed to that point in Star Trek. So, you know, and again, going back to that, like, well, where did it come from? Again, like, it feels like it's from just a completely different show altogether. Like I said, you know.
William?
Yeah, I absolutely echo that everything I said, because I'm still quite thrown, and I was still really curious about, did Gene Roddenberry or any of the Trek cast have anything to say? Mm-hmm. And from what I just found, and I'm going to read a snippet. I'm going to read a little bit from a piece I just read. Like, it's Will Wheaton, and he reviewed the show, and he reviewed it as an adult, whereas back then he was just a young teenager, like a preteen at that point, if I'm not mistaken. Well,
I mean, he was fresh off Stand By Me.
Yeah, he was very
fresh. Hell, I'm actually surprised LeVar Burton didn't have anything to say about it. But I look, right, exactly. So that
I mean, Frakes literally called it a racist piece of shit.
And again, it's the fact that, like, LeVar, clearly no one asked LeVar Burton what he thought of this at the time. Clearly that wasn't from past.
Well, maybe it's just one of those things, because he was still, even though he had just done Roots, he was still young enough at the time that maybe if you opened your mouth like Gates McFadden did, it might, you know, have you removed from the show temporarily, you know. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for anything, and the closest thing to summarize, and I'll still read it, it's a little bit, is to summarize, was that it was normal back then. That was their norm. That was their norm, to portray whatever they thought was normal. So back then they didn't see anything wrong, even though we know in the 21st century, hell, we knew in the 90s that it was wrong, right? So it's let's see, several reviewers rewatched the episode following the end of the series. So, because, you know, naturally, and that actually kind of makes sense, because whenever you see like Maria Sirtis or William Shatner or Patrick Stewart, they don't go back and watch their own shows. That's not really a thing, you know, unless they absolutely have to for some Comic-Con they have to go to. Well, anyway, rewatch the shows following the end of the series. Cast member Will Wheaton reviewed it in April of 2008. So this was a long conversation coming. He couldn't remember actually appearing in the episode, and it was the first time since it was originally broadcast that he had seen it. He said that it wasn't good, but that it was not as overly racist as I recalled. I mean, it's this is the quote. This is the quote. This is the quote. He said, "Not as overly racist as I recalled. I mean, it's certainly not as racist as Angel 1, which is an episode in season 1.
So it's not as bad because it's not as racist as this other. race.
So we got
I
wait.
am
Also, let's have a moment, right? Let's have a moment to talk about this because Angel One is not about race. Angel One is about gender and is trying to basically, which is another great episode that we're going to cover in this segment because it's awful terrible,
Right.
awfully
Oh my god,
terrible.
my partner has feelings about that episode.
It's literally casting women like a feminist society the way through a masculine lens. Like this is what they think a feminist society is going to look like, and it's going to oppress men the same way everybody else, like women have been oppressed historically. And yeah, no, but that doesn't even make sense.
I'm just reading what he said because you got to think.
Excuse me. I'm going to have to get something harder than tea because we have now passed the tea threshold. So I'm going directly to bourbon, y'all.
Okay, go straight to bourbon. I'm having my vegan shit.
I came prepared.
No, I'm gonna finish it.
Also, please note this is my code of honor bourbon container.
Oh, that's nice. It gives me Undiscovered Country vibes.
It's from the Enterprise A. It's literally the Falsgraph, the Falsgraph release.
But yeah,
But anyway,
so I'm gonna finish this quote. He said, "It's certainly not as racist as Angel One is sexist, and if the Ligonians hadn't been arbitrarily determined to be entirely African American, it wouldn't have even been an issue." He said that the episode is an example of the type of episodes in the first season that would have resulted in the show being canceled mid-season if it hadn't been so well supported by fans and run directly into syndication. James Hunt, writing of Den of Creek episode, asserted that the episode was racist. He said that this isn't just bad television, it's openly offensive, and it seems to do its best effort to undo some of the most important lessons the original series imparted some 25 years after we're supposed to have learned them. Overall, he said that this was quite possibly the worst piece of Star Trek ever made.
And okay, so we jumped the gun on ragging on Will Wheaton, but Will Wheaton isn't going to escape being ragged on for this.
Good God, no.
No, because let's have a moment. Because like, if it hadn't been conceived of as entirely African American, if they had been anything else, it would have been okay. Except one, they were, and two, look at them. Look at the costume design.
That's like
and
saying, the Klingons being blackface in the original series would not have been as bad if they weren't blackfaced in the original series.
Because I feel like he was comparing like moral issues. Well, it's not as racist as Angel One is as sexist. I'm like, they're both still bad. What are you talking about?
So look at this. This is what I'm talking about. Like, you cannot
tell me. Right there. Look, he is gorgeous.
You cannot tell me that this image right here, because this is the first time we see Luton, right? Like, you actually see the red carpet. Luton's not wearing a shirt. They are wearing like harem pants. They're wearing turbans. Like, he's wearing this giant jewel. No, like, you cannot tell me that you would have put white actors in those costumes.
I wouldn't want to wear them.
Like, I mean, that would never have happened. Because clearly they were looking at what they had, and they had to come up with a primitive society. So the first thing they thought of was Space Africa.
I have a theory.
And they're there, right? Like, the Enterprise is there to pick up a vaccine that cannot be replicated. I don't remember if the show makes it clear that the Ligonians developed the vaccine, or if it just occurred naturally.
No,
my feeling is
they don't. They don't. I had to read that on Mary Alpha while I was looking it up for this episode, because when I rewatched it today, that was not apparent. They were just going to pick up the vaccine. They could have.
Guys?
Oh, yeah, no. And then also, let's look at the linguistic structure, too, right? I mean, the Ligonians, I mean, Star Trek makes up languages and gives things funky names. That has been true forever, right? But the Ligonians don't get that even that dignified treatment. No, 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 no. Because Luton invites the Enterprise crew who come down to the planet to his center place.
Mm.
Y'all. Y'all. I mean, his wife is his first one. I mean, we're not talking about, I mean, we are hitting the primitive drum really, really hard. I mean, it's almost as unsubtle as, say, This Side of Paradise back in the original series, which, you know, is a truly depressing image of like indigenous cultures. Um, I mean, come on. I mean, that wouldn't. I mean, if you'd cast white actors in that, and then didn't make them up like crazy town aliens, say Cardassians, Ferengi, whatever, um, this would not have. I mean, this would not have happened.
Okay, I have a theory, more like a revelation.
I'm gonna need more bourbon for this.
Yeah.
Mm. Mind you, Trekker's Delight is not advocating alcoholism, so imbibe responsibly.
Yes, please do. So, and and Jermaine, whenever you can find a photo of this, please put it up. I just realized something, and I had to look it up just to be absolutely sure.
Mm.
Code of Honor and Coming to America were made in the same year.
Because we're dealing with the same stereotypes, right? Like, I mean, sure, yeah, look
Like,
at this. This is
look
this
at
is the
this.
center place.
Like,
Okay,
so
guys.
seriously, because Code of Honor was released in 1988. No, no, no,
No,
87.
87.
87.
87.
It was 87, and Coming to America was released in 88. It takes a year or more to make a film. So, and knowing that this is a TNG episode, it probably didn't take like a few weeks.
Also, I gotta say, I really appreciate the fact that like Riker face palming is all you see on that one side when those pictures come up. It's so appropriate because there's
Wow.
I mean, admittedly, this is still first season, so this is before Riker gets good. You can tell because he's clean shaven. But yeah,
Mm.
but yeah, like, and they're dealing with a lot of the same stereotypes.
Oh,
It's
it's
a
the
lot of
exact
things. What do
same
you think?
stereotype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like one has the Eddie Murphy intention of being a comedy,
Yep.
which I suppose. I don't know if they were in the same studio and they just happened to be next door to each other, and Gene popped his head and he's like, "Ooh, cool," and then come back and said, "Hey, I have an idea. Let's do this." That see,
Mm.
like it's a bit Americanized, but you can like see it, like
Yeah.
like
It's
this.
not far fetched to think that a script was floating around, you know, that someone picked up and found somewhere. Like that happens all the time in these situations.
Right, but it's I mean
Yeah.
but it is it's such a lens that they're using,
Yeah.
right? It's this white man looking into
Mhm.
the dark continent.
Yep.
And you even get Picard very early on commenting that but for the Prime Directive, he would impose Federation mores onto these people. Like, so Picard apparently was carrying the white man's burden on that issue and wasn't allowed to put it down.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not, again, that's not something that happens. Like, he doesn't talk about that in those terms about any other culture.
He literally does not, because when he said that line, that reminded me of the original Christopher Pike saying, "I don't know how I feel about having a woman on the bridge."
Right. Right.
Like, okay, again, season 1, I'm giving you a hell of a pass. Like, but I'm still wanting to have this conversation, because here's the thing: you will say this about this primitive culture, but you will go to bat over a Maquis world that now belongs to Cardassia over some stupid treaty, by the way, which I do think is stupid, and which is based.
Journey's End is a whole mess of an episode.
You already know what I'm talking about. You already knew where I was going. and he
It
made
was
this
a whole
whole
lot.
speech about conquering lands and colonizers and a whole speech about it. And Wesley rolls all kinds of hell over it before he disappeared into with the traveler that was
Right, and then they play with the magic Indian, like the magic Indian
all
trope,
that
and
stuff.
then the only good thing about Journey's End is they actually refer to the Pueblo Revolt, which did happen, and is still very, very important to the indigenous cultures in the American Southwest. Even
Right, right. So the only theory from a filmmaking perspective that I have is just like kind of what Robin said. It's just like the story was floating around, it was morphed, it was taken, you know, well, from today on back, the further you go back, the more stereotypes, whether they're negative or positive, are imposed upon people of color.
like look at that image, right, of them in the center place. The backdrop is red, you know. It's very, I truly expect, a character out of one of Conrad's novels, to come out and talk about like having been worshipped as a god. I mean, it's this dark part of Africa, kind of deep. I mean, I guess I should be grateful Urena gets to wear clothes in that section. Not to say that her previous dress was unattractive, but like
It's a dress.
it put her at
Yeah.
such an interesting, and it's such an interesting sort of like disadvantage to even Counselor Troy, who was wearing her god awful season 1 penis hair outfit. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about, because it's like, I think it was for the first few episodes. We'll come back to it, but for the first few episodes, that was her actual hair.
Mhm.
And then they went for the wig in later seasons. So.
Yeah, but also it's still ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
still
still trying
ridiculous.
to,
And then of
like,
course we have that belt that goes around her waist so that we can like emphasize her femininity, because Troy also ends up, I mean, it's not accidental that Troy gets passed over for Yar, because they're literally trying to say something about whiteness. Because Marina Sirtis is of Greek descent.
mm,
And so she doesn't look like the perfect image of whiteness that you get with, say, Denise Crosby's Tasha Yar, who is, despite the fact that her hair is short, is she still blonde haired, blue eyed, conventionally attractive. Um,
That's so
so
interesting
she's
because
the
I
one who
can't
gets
even,
picked by Luton.
yeah. And I can't even see someone like Crusher being in the same role in this episode, right? It's like I can specifically see this role being for Tasha and only for Tasha. Whereas, like if you add Marina in, then you still have a little bit of that whiteness to play with, but it's a different type of whiteness a little bit. And then with
right.
Beverly, you have kind of an age dynamic as well. So that is really unique.
That's a good point about
It makes a
age.
difference. It makes a
That's a
difference.
really good point about age, because for a long time, Trek actually kind of struggles with the concept of how women age, particularly. Like, there's a reason Luoxana gets played for laughs.
Right.
Like, the concept of Luoxana being a woman of a certain age and still having, a sexual identity is hilarious. But Picard, who looks like Picard, is able to get laid.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I think you're right. I don't think they could have put Beverly here, because she's more mature. She's not going to put up with this nonsense. Like, she's not going to get involved with. I mean, even if Urena is saying, I'm invoking my right to conflict, which is or to combat, which is interesting to me. That she has that right, one, because that goes to talk about the violence of primitive Black culture. I think my fingers are actually going to fall. Yeah, look at this. Look at this outfit, y'all.
If that ain't something from Coming to America, I don't know what it is.
I know, right?
I swear they must have gotten some like old fabric or some old costume edit, something from that movie.
I mean, we got to say that's not the most flattering shot of Denise Crosby that has ever been made.
I like it. I might make it my phone wallpaper now. That's kind of cool.
I know, right?
I actually found some more that
and even like the weapons that the Legonians have. there's the glove thing with all the spikes. It's
Yeah,
not
with poison on it.
right. I mean,
Who
we're not
uses
talking
poison
something.
anymore?
We're not talking something that's like elegant, say, a batleth, a mechleth, or um, the weapons that Spock was using, like the
Mm.
Lirpa in a mock time. No, 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 no. Like this is borderline crazy gladiator nonsense. With an extra added rub of poison, right? Because only the primitive culture is going to dip their thing, like dip their weapons in poison
Mm.
because they're not civilized.
I have two things. I have a thing from Jonathan Frakes who spoke about it,
Mm.
and he spoke about it recently at a Comic Con actually.
Mm.
And I have a short what if question, but I'm going to read this
Mm.
first. So Frakes brought attention to the episode during the virtual panel when a discussion of the series led him to ask if Code of Honor would be discussed. He referred to the episode as the embarrassment heaped upon us in season one, mostly on Denise. Somewhat incredulous, I believe that's how you say it, Crosby asked, "Can you imagine playing that right now in this climate?" Likely referring to recent anti-racism protests. So this was a pretty recent interview. Crosby and Frakes, of course, aren't the only ones of Star Trek to criticize the episode over the years. Fellow actors LeVar Burton, Michael Dorn, Brent Spiner, and even staff writer Tracy Torme.
Torme.
Thank you, among many others, have all shared their disdain for Code of Honor. So they've shared their disdain. So
I mean, the only reason we can't see LeVar Burton rolling his eyes is because he's wearing the visor, right?
and
I mean,
he's probably rolling his eye. Half the time he's asleep. Actually, he's asleep. We've already figured that out.
Yeah.
Well, at least that's what I've learned.
and meanwhile, Michael Dorn is like, "I hate the fact that you get the visor." Like,
I know.
I
Here's
have
the thing.
This headpiece doesn't cover my eyes enough.
As a Klingon, he has to look angry anyway. But I guarantee he was actually angry. Like I'm so serious. So I actually have two questions. One, do you believe that this may have somehow contributed to the reasoning for Denise leaving the show?
It did not.
It did not.
It did not. The reason, my understanding, which admittedly it's been a hot minute since I've looked into this, but my understanding is actually that it was a conflict with Rick Berman.
Really, that's interesting. Because isn't that
also what happened to Terry Farrell?
Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Interesting.
What a dick. Anyway, okay, that's question number one. Question number two. Here's the what if. If this show were to be remade today, in your heads, how would it be remade properly?
I really feel like this needed to have been on a different segment, William. I really
can imagine Jermaine's face right now. Like
getting back from my bad question in our chat.
I don't know how. Like, I mean, you really just need to you just need to take the script and burn it in the back. Like, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, because it's like if they have the unmitigated goal to go and screw up the Klingons in Discovery, I want to know how could they possibly.
So
I'm gonna need unmitigated gall one more time though, like before we move on.
So short of just
unmitigated gall.
Yeah. So short of just burning it and then murdering the children of the person who wrote this script, so he would never write it again.
Ooh. Robin's got some things. I want everybody to note, I'm not the one who went to murder first.
That's because the thing you could do to kind of,
I mean, just use your imagination. Just use your imagination.
I am. Like, I'm legitimately doing that. And I mean,
short of a complete just reconceptualizing of the entire thing.
I think we can keep the vaccine part, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it's not a vaccine. We've got to get like a component that can't be synthesized that exists nowhere else. And I think maybe it's somewhere between Who Watches the Watchers, right? And Data's experience in, that period piece that came out of like Doctor Who and landed in Star Trek somehow.
It's really
right, like where they're sneaking around and trying to deal and like trying to avoid this because clearly these people, clearly the society has some issues, right?
Or you can, I don't know, maybe you just give the women more agency in the story, but even then, like, that still doesn't change giving them more agency.
I mean, like you give the women more agency. Like, I mean, Urena gets some agency, right? Like she's allowed to invoke right of combat, and that's not an insignificant right. Like if we think about it. Now, admittedly, her anger is misplaced. Like she needs to be pissed at Luton, not at Tasha Yar.
Yes.
Is there another, now that also brings me to say, is this another false representation of an angry Black woman?
I think no, because Urena never quite hits that stereotype. What I think this is more so is the stereotype of the lascivious Black man.
Yeah. The lusty Black man.
Right, the lusty Black man who is again preying on white women.
Yeah.
Which is a stereotype that is lethal. Right? I mean, that's what sparked Emmett Till's murder.
It's true. And I'm still one of the things I remember us talking about is saying it without saying it. I feel like because there was a lot, of course, there's racism all around, but one of the things that I remember reading historically from the 50s and 60s and 70s and on forward was that people of color were aliens that were never meant to be on Earth in the first place. And when I saw that, it made me think, is this where you think we came from? And I didn't know how to feel about that because we've already established in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, that whales are not from Earth. Like we've already,
or alternatively, that somebody visited the whales and was like,
"Please don't get me started on Voyage Home. Please don't get me started on the whales." Please.
Oh no, Robin, I like you. Don't say anything about 4. 4 is my comfort movie. It's terrible, but I love it. The nuclear vessels.
Nuclear vessels. I'll read that.
Yeah, like I mean,
it's a better twist than the dolphins in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I will say that. Better twist.
I swear, this show has already meandered into so many different fandoms. More than any other of the segments that I've been in.
I'm sorry, I've talked about Doctor Who.
No, it's fine. Like, no, you're right. I mean, so long and thanks for all the fish.
I think.
But coming back to this.
Oh yeah, coming back to the point. Okay, can you tell me, Marie? I have a question for you. What was your initial reaction when your very first, like number one?
So I watched this as a child growing up in South Georgia, right? It went over my head completely.
Right.
Like, I did not realize that this was as heinous as it is because, I am squarely invested in white privilege, right?
Okay.
Like, if I were asked to see myself in somebody, it's Tasha Yar, who manages to, like, toss Hagen on his butt at one point, right? And it wasn't until I was much older and going back and doing a rewatch, and I'm sitting here like, like, how did this get made? Like, who thought this was a good idea?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, right? Like a little bit when, we were kids, maybe not picking up on some of the things that were going on in the episode. And I gotta say, I'm a little embarrassed that it took me a couple of bounces of that particular ball.
It happens because when I was a teenager, I didn't know what I was watching either.
I don't know.
But also, I mean, but you would have picked up on this much earlier than I would because
Well, yeah.
you're not viewing the world through a lens provided by white privilege.
Robin, what would you say your first reaction was?
So, so growing up, I watched Star Trek with my mom, right? And we have watched literally almost every episode together, even Enterprise, and she does not like Enterprise. And this
For good
is
reason.
She was one of the ones that got it canceled.
yeah, sorry. You can blame my mom for canceling Enterprise. Um, but this is one of the ones we would skip. I didn't watch the full episode until probably college when
Mm,
TNG was on Netflix, and I did like a
yeah.
full rewatch of the show.
Mhm.
I saw the images, you know, because you can always look them up and Google them and go like, oh, racist moments in Star Trek or whatever. But so I always was kind of present, knowing that this was like not an okay representation. Although a lot of me kind of thinking like, if I had just seen it without that knowledge, without being black and a black woman raised by a black woman, I would just kind of go, oh shit, this is a badass episode for Tasha Yar, right? Like she knocks down the fucking
Right.
patriarchy.
I mean, she kicks ass.
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
She doesn't. Like, that's what's terrible about it. Because the resolution of this episode makes me so mad. Okay? It infuriates me. Because rather than taking the opportunity to say, F this nutbar, and I'm going to remake society because I have the money and I own all the things, Urena divorces Luton and hitches herself to Hagan, perpetuating this nonsense.
Yeah. See, this would be a good episode in modern if you just go, fuck it, let's make it gay. And then just at the end, her and Tasha just go happily together and be gay together, even if it didn't make any sense. Like, that's the kind of way I feel about this episode.
that you feel like that would have saved
I
it?
keep coming back to William's question: how would you remake this episode to make it work? And I stand behind my assertion: like, take the script out back and burn it and start over, because there's no I think again, I think Will Wheaton is wrong. I think this episode would never have been made with white actors, and I think ignoring that fact, right, if indeed it is a fact, is kind of missing part of the point. Because even if the script wrote it this way, primitive culture, very militaristic, blah blah blah, right? If that was the casting call, they picked all black people.
Was this their way to get people of color onto the show just so he could say he had people of color in season 1?
See, but he didn't need to do that. He has, yeah.
I know he had them. Yeah, he had them. He had LeVar Burton. He had Michael Dorn. He had whatever. But it's just and like I said, I get low budgets kind of take away alien features. I get that. But baby, if you can make a puppy and put a little horn on it in the original series and call that an alien, baby, I am with you. Okay.
I mean, Icheb, right? Icheb just had like a line, like not even like the crinkles for the Bajorans. Like, I mean, come on.
I mean,
come on.
Like, and some of them just have like spots, or like like the trail spots have done. That's it. You don't have to do much. Because
honestly, I don't think even creative alien design saved this.
If you look very closely at Luton and Hagan, they have ritual scarification.
What?
They got like
yeah,
like, because apparently, again, space Africa means you cut yourself in order to prove your masculinity.
Something that I've heard here in the South: the more scars and the more bruises you have, the more attractive you are to women.
I mean, that's probably the thought, right?
I've heard. Now, I can't say that outside of the South and in the city. I can't say that.
Is,
But
is is this the chicks dig scars
I've heard
thing?
that from both black and white. Me personally,
I don't even know what to say about that, Robin.
Robin, what's your type, Robin?
So, ask my fiance. So nosy. Yes, Jermaine, he's so nosy.
I know.
I mean, we here. We here. We got 14 minutes left. Like we here.
Oh my god! Like you've gone full Southern, William. 14 minutes.
We got 14. We got 14.
14.
14.
Oh my
Scars
god!
don't
Like
do it for me. Sorry.
this is bananas. This is bananas. But if we were to take this discussion in one final direction, where do you think we would go with it? What do you want? Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get into the just random silliness that probably people are here for anyway?
I kind of want to answer my own question to answer your question. That I asked earlier. Where would I take the show if it were to be remade today?
Mhm.
I would expand on the universe of the culture and reveal a lot of things. Let's just say a lot of things that we didn't know that weren't revealed in Code of Honor. That would help explain away a lot of stuff that we saw. And I'm not trying to justify anything. Now, and now makeup wise, I don't know how I would make it. I'm sure, but it would be different. It would be different. Okay. Them scars, baby, they gonna have to be something more defining, like, or something, like it's something to, from a Hollywood perspective, to explain away what has happened and do the ritual again, but this time get a dude fighting for another dude. I don't know, like, like really play with it. Say that this culture is not just warrior-esque heterosexual stereotypes. You can expand on their sexuality, their gender identity. There's so many things you can go through and say, oh, that was the time of the year where we had to dress like that, but normally we look like this, like stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? You can do a lot of stuff to expand on the universe. It's kind of like how Discovery.
Let's pull back. Let's pull back. Let's have Tasha Yar fight Luton.
Ooh.
Let's have Tasha Yar, who grew up at Scrappy. Let's have her fight Luton and wipe the floor with him.
Yeah. I would turn it more, so I would change the dynamic between the two, right? So maybe make Luton desperate, right? Like Urena has all the power in the relationship because she's rich, right? So maybe the only way that Luton keeps his title is by finding bigger and better, right? So make Tasha the representative, getting the vaccine from them, and then, oh, there's the bigger and better, right? Because you have this powerful Federation person coming in, getting these vaccines, representing a new life, new opportunity for them, blah, 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 and that increases their power. So make it, rebalance that power so he needs the woman in his life, not that he just wants the woman to fight over him because he's whatever. So.
Yeah, he's too big for his harem pants.
Yeah, just shrink the harem pants a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe,
right.
Not use the Coming to America costumes and get some actual costuming.
Yeah, please change
it. We're just recognize that, Africa is not necessarily this primitive world, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about a continent of, a tremendous amount of diversity, right? Like linguistic diversity, cultural diversity. Mali was one of the oldest civilizations. They've got incredible art and history. I mean, it's not just it's not just Ligon whatever.
Yeah, going back to putting life into the world. Why is the planet red and desolate? Why is it just so cramped and small? Why can't it be, like like Vulcan or these futuristic cities that we see, right? Why can't it look like a reflection of Earth, right? Because that's
Do we
interesting.
even see? I mean, I'm trying to think. Do we even see much of an actual building on Lygon? I mean, I think the only roof in the whole shebang is on the gladiator arena.
Mhm.
I think Vulcan had more ruin-esque structural to its
Yeah,
sandy.
Vulcan was also all white people until Tim Russ.
Mm.
You're not wrong.
Not with your chest now.
Okay. Oh, there is one last pet peeve that I had with Code of Honor, as far as the two women and the man part. You know how typically when a man cheats on a woman, that that man's wife will go and fight the woman when she really should be fighting the man.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That I kind of like saw that. Like,
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
yeah,
Like
that's what we were talking about
misplaced
earlier. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because what's actually happening is the power dynamic is very different, right? Like because she can't actually be angry at the man because he's the one that holds all the cards and
All
holds
the
the
cards.
entire the relationship hostage. But we can go after that other woman because we're on the same sort of like power
Thank you.
parallel, if you will,
Yeah.
which is terrible and awful and not the way to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, just a big, important message for all Trekkies out there. I'm not saying cancel it, but I am saying like do kind of like what they do on Disney Plus and have them put a message in the front of the episode to let them know, because I would still watch it and I would show it to my children for educational purposes. This is the way portrayal was back then.
It
This
is
was
one of the
wrong.
3 episodes that I will not watch. But I think you're right. I think there's a very good point to be made that we've gone from Code of Honor in 1987 to 2021 with Michael Burnham.
Yeah.
That's a long way in.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Almost
think
a little over 30 years. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So so I'm actually going to take a minute and we are going to take a look at something else completely different that's been recorded for your enjoyment. Hi, everybody. I am Marie Brownhill, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here for the live stream, so you get me in absentia. One of the things I really want to talk about with respect to this particular episode is that Anomaly is largely about grief, and it presents 2 competing visions of how to handle grief. The first is how Book isolates himself, and all the other characters tend to isolate themselves with respect to their grief, because grief is a profoundly isolating experience. Saru is right. Each one of us has to walk through our experience of grief independently.
Bruh. Are you streaming?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. All right. Take it away, girl.
Grief is a profoundly isolating experience, right? And Saru is correct that all of us have to walk through that process individually. However, nothing says that that journey has to be made alone, and that's what we actually see with Stamets and Book. And it's fantastic that they choose to put Stamets, who is possibly the most awkward character on that ship, in the position of having to comfort Book, or at least offer support to Book, and then in turn offer community to Book, which is ultimately the solution and what brings Book back to Discovery. Because Stamets represents that awkwardness that all of us have felt in the wake of someone we love experiencing a loss. What do you say? How do you handle it? The answer is you don't say anything. The answer is you follow, as Culver says, you follow their lead and you offer them community, because only by reinforcing that connection can they really find their way back. It's really just a question of support. And watching that unfold in Anomaly is huge because it's not something we've ever seen Trek handle, because Trek tends to treat grief as a one and done situation. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how those themes continue to unfold. Also, any episode in which we see our Space Cat Queen, Grudge, is automatically a favorite in my book. So I certainly hope all of you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you next week. We figured it was such a heavy conversation that you needed to see, like, me being completely silly and kind of dealing with regular life. But I also think community is important, and Code of Honor is a really good look at a community being broken, and it's being broken by the structure of its own rules, right? Because you can't have real community, you can't have real interdependence when one group of people has more power than the other. Unfortunately, the TNG era Federation doesn't quite grasp that and doesn't make that offer to the Ligonians, whereas later, significantly later in 3191, Discovery does. So I think it's also important to kind of look at where the lowest point of Star Trek is, and I think we all agree that this is the lowest point of Star Trek.
Yeah.
But then also to look forward to where we go from here. So, any parting thoughts, Robin and Lee?
I concur.
Well done. Brevity is the soul of wit. And I think William has frozen on us, so I don't know that we're going to get much out of him. Oh, wait, he's back! He's back!
Is he here?
Nope.
No, it's me.
Yeah, but I mean, I really feel like we needed to end this on a lighter note anyway.
That was great. And then my partner is like peeking around the corner like, can I come out now? Can I come out now? So that will happen eventually.
It's like, no.
And I was like,
no. Unless, of course, you want to like sneak in like Robert did,
No, I'm just like, play your PS4. You're fine. You're over there. You're fine.
All right, guys. I am extremely grateful that you have stuck with us this long. I hope you like and subscribe to Trekker's Delight, and I hope you come back for Fight the Patriarchy, which is going to alternate with Trek What If. So I think we're going to do Angel 1 next. We'll segue into that. So join us again. Bye, guys.
See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.